When the alien princess took the human's hand, the galaxy fell silent. Inside, the halls hummed softly, filled with a quiet energy that seemed almost alive. Elias adjusted the strap of his uniform and took a deep breath. He had traveled far from Earth, farther than any human diplomat had ever gone before. The interstellar summit on Lyria was his first assignment, and the responsibility weighed on him more heavily than he expected. He was nervous, but he could feel a quiet excitement too. This was history in the making, and he, a simple human, was at the center of it. The summit was unlike anything Elias had ever imagined. The main hall was vast, with high ceilings that shimmered as if made of liquid light. Floating gardens lined the walls, their plants glowing softly in colors he had no names for. The air smelled faintly sweet, and the sounds of distant music, soft and harmonious, filled the space. Delegates from countless worlds milled about, their shapes and sizes varying so dramatically that Elias could not stop staring. Some were tall and elegant, with skin like polished stone. Others were small and glowing, with wings that flitted in intricate patterns. Every being he saw carried itself with dignity, and yet there was a palpable tension in the room, as though everyone was measuring one another in silence. Elias straightened his posture as he approached the central area, where the most important delegates would gather. He had read about the Navari, the species that ruled Lyria, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing one in person. Princess Lyra stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by her aides. She was taller than most humans, her skin a pale, iridescent hue that shimmered faintly in the light. Her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to hold the calm of the entire galaxy. There was a grace in the way she moved, a quiet confidence that made her impossible to ignore. As Elias stepped closer, he felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room on him. He swallowed and reminded himself that he was here not as a visitor, but as a representative of humanity. He had been trained in diplomacy, negotiation, and cultural etiquette, but all of that felt small in the face of the vastness surrounding him. The other delegates watched silently, and for a moment, Elias wondered if he would even be allowed to approach the princess. Then Lyra's eyes met his. There was a flicker of curiosity there, a light that seemed to reach through the barriers of species and distance. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture that could have been an invitation or a test. Elias stepped forward, heart pounding. When he reached her, he bowed slightly, offering the traditional greeting he had practiced for days. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest, "it is an honor to meet you." Lyra smiled softly and then, without hesitation, she extended her hand. Elias paused. In all the readings he had done, in all the briefings he had attended, there was no mention of what the Navari considered proper protocol for human touch. And yet, something inside him urged him to reach out. He placed his hand in hers. The hall went silent. Delegates froze mid-step, murmurs died in every corner, and even the soft music seemed to pause. The contact was brief, but it carried a weight Elias could feel down to his fingertips. There was warmth in Lyra's grasp, but more than that there was understanding, a recognition of humanity that no words could convey. For a moment the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Lyra spoke, her voice melodic and calm. "Welcome, Elias. I am pleased to finally meet the humans who have traveled so far." Elias nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. "The honor is mine, Princess. I have heard much about the Navari, but nothing prepares one for seeing such beauty in person." He smiled, hoping it did not sound foolish. Lyra's eyes twinkled, and for a moment Elias thought he saw a hint of amusement. "You speak as if the Navari are merely objects to behold," she said gently. "We are more than appearances, just as humans are more than curiosity." He chuckled softly. "I hope to learn more than appearances, Princess. I hope to understand." The princess nodded, and the brief tension that had gripped the room seemed to lift. Delegates slowly returned to their movements, whispers resuming in a hushed but excited tone. Elias felt a flush of pride. The gesture, simple as it was, had done something extraordinary. It had bridged a gap no one expected could be bridged so quickly. Over the next few hours, Elias found himself guided through the summit by Lyra herself. She moved gracefully through the gardens, explaining the customs of her people and the delicate protocols that had governed the summit for centuries. Elias listened intently, asking questions whenever he could, and Lyra answered with patience and clarity. She seemed genuinely curious about humans, about their ways, their planet, and their history. "What is it that drives humans?" Lyra asked at one point as they walked along a path lined with glowing plants. "You travel across vast distances, risking the unknown not for conquest or power but for understanding. Why?" Elias thought for a moment. "Perhaps because we hope to connect. We believe that even across the stars there is value in understanding one another. We are small, young, and sometimes clumsy, but we try to see the good in others." Lyra smiled, a small, radiant curve of her lips. "A rare trait indeed. Many species seek only advantage or security. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated humans." As the day passed, Elias realized he was learning as much about the Navari as they were learning about him. Their world was filled with subtle beauty, gardens that responded to emotions, structures that seemed to float effortlessly, and a calmness that spoke of centuries of careful thought. Yet beneath this elegance, Elias sensed a curiosity that matched his own. Lyra's people, despite their wisdom and longevity, were eager to see what humans could offer. When they reached a balcony overlooking a field of luminous trees, Lyra stopped and gestured to the view. "This is one of the oldest gardens on Lyria. Each tree has been here for centuries, yet they continue to grow and change. It reminds me that even the oldest beings can learn from the new." Elias nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "I hope humans can live up to that ideal. We may be young, but we have the desire to grow." Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed almost human in her expression. "Then perhaps this summit is more than a meeting of delegates. Perhaps it is a meeting of possibilities." As the day drew to a close, the summit hall emptied, leaving only a few delegates lingering to admire the gardens. Elias and Lyra walked back to the central chamber, hands brushing lightly at times, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. It was a small connection, yet it carried the weight of something much greater, a promise that humans were not merely visitors in the galaxy, but potential partners, capable of offering wisdom, empathy, and hope. Before Elias departed for his quarters, Lyra turned to him and said, "Remember, Elias, this gesture today. It is not just a greeting. It is a signal. The galaxy is watching, and sometimes the smallest actions can echo louder than the loudest proclamations." Elias nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. "I will remember, Princess. I will do my best to honor it." As he walked down the corridor, the lights of Lyria reflecting softly on the polished floor, Elias felt a mix of awe and determination. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns, but for the first time, he felt that humans could not only survive among the stars, they could make a difference. That night, as he gazed out of the viewport at the sparkling nebulae and distant worlds, he thought of Lyra's hand, warm and steady in his. The memory filled him with a quiet strength. Perhaps the galaxy had never truly seen humans before, and perhaps now, through a simple gesture of trust and connection, a new story was beginning. Elias drifted to sleep with that thought in his mind, unaware that the ripple of his and Lyra's connection had already begun to spread beyond the walls of the summit. Across star systems, whispers of the unprecedented moment traveled faster than any message could be sent. A human and an alien hand in hand. The galaxy paused, uncertain and curious, waiting to see what would come next. It was a small act, a brief touch, but Elias felt it in every part of him. He was a human, young and inexperienced, Yet in that moment, he realized something profound. The galaxy was listening, and it was beginning to understand. The first day of the summit had ended, but for Elias, it was only the beginning. He could not know how far the gesture would reach, nor could he foresee the changes it would bring. All he knew was that he had taken a hand, and in doing so, he had taken a first step into a future that was wide, bright, and full of possibility. And somewhere in the distant stars, the galaxy fell silent, watching, wondering, and waiting for what would happen next. The morning sun of Lyria bathed the floating gardens in a soft golden light that seemed to shimmer in the iridescent leaves. Elias walked slowly through the pathways, his mind still replaying the events of the previous day. The touch of Princess Lyra's hand lingered in his memory, warm and calm, and he could not shake the feeling that something important had begun, something far beyond what any human had expected. Around him, the gardens buzzed softly with life. Plants of all shapes and colors seemed to react to movement and sound, swaying gently even when there was no breeze. Tiny glowing creatures darted between the flowers, leaving faint trails of light as if painting the air itself. Elias had been invited by Lyra to explore the deeper parts of the gardens, places few visitors had ever seen. The palace had vast corridors, some of which led to areas where the plants were ancient, older than any human memory, older than any star he had studied. Lyra moved ahead of him with a grace that made the walk seem effortless. Her presence was comforting, and he realized that despite the differences in their species, there was a kind of rhythm to her that felt familiar, almost human in its simplicity. "This part of the garden," Lyra said softly, her voice carrying over the humming of the plants, "is where we keep our oldest specimens. Each tree, each flower, has witnessed generations of Navari history. They remind us that growth takes patience and understanding requires time." Elias nodded, taking in the enormity of what she said. He glanced at the trees towering above them, their branches stretching far beyond what his eyes could follow. "It's incredible," he said. "I've never seen anything like this. On Earth, we have forests, but nothing that seems alive in the same way." Lyra smiled. "Life is more than movement and sound, Elias. It is connection. Even a single gesture can carry meaning beyond words, beyond history. You understand this, even without knowing it fully." Elias felt a warmth rise in his chest. He had always believed in the power of small gestures, but he had never imagined that the simplest action, holding someone's hand, could resonate across worlds. "I hope I can do justice to that understanding," he said quietly. "You already have," Lyra replied. Her eyes softened, and she paused to touch a flower that glowed brighter at her touch. "The galaxy watches carefully, Elias. Many species have waited centuries for something to remind them of possibility. Perhaps your people are that reminder." They walked in silence for a few minutes, allowing the gardens themselves to speak. The air was alive with color and subtle sounds, a quiet music that no human instrument could reproduce. Elias felt himself relax, feeling a sense of calm he had never known before. Here, among beings and plants older than his imagination, he felt the presence of something greater than himself, something that connected all life across the stars. After a while, Lyra stopped at a bridge that spanned a shallow pool of water. The water shimmered with colors that shifted and flowed, reflecting the sky above and the floating gardens around them. "Many delegates fear the unknown," she said, gesturing to the water. "They travel far, yet they remain trapped by their expectations. You, however, seem willing to look beyond what is known." Elias looked down at the water, fascinated by the way the light played across its surface. "I don't know if I have a choice," he said honestly. "Humans are always reaching for something beyond ourselves. It's part of who we are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we keep trying." Lyra's eyes brightened, as if she understood something profound in his words. "It is rare for a species to embrace the unknown so openly. Most see it as a threat. You see it as opportunity." Elias smiled, feeling a sense of pride, though modest. "Perhaps that is why we are here," he said. "Not just to participate in the summit, but to remind others that cooperation and understanding are possible." Lyra extended her hand again, this time gently guiding him to the edge of the bridge. "Sometimes," she said, "a gesture is worth more than an argument, more than a treaty. A touch, a smile, a shared moment. These are the ways trust begins." Elias felt the truth in her words. He had not expected to find a kindred spirit in an alien princess, but here she was, offering wisdom and connection without expectation, without judgment. He took her hand lightly, feeling a spark of warmth and reassurance. In that moment, it seemed as though the gardens themselves acknowledged the bond, the glowing plants shimmering brighter as if celebrating the simple act of connection. They spent the morning walking through more hidden paths, sharing stories of their worlds. Elias spoke of Earth, of oceans and mountains, of cities and forests, and of humans' endless curiosity. Lyra listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed not just her intelligence but her desire to understand. In turn, she shared the history of the Navari, of how their people had learned to observe the galaxy without interfering, to guide and advise rather than conquer. "You value life in ways humans may not fully grasp," Elias said at one point. "Your people have watched the stars for centuries, and yet you approach us not as strangers but as equals." Lyra tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "It is because we sense potential. Humans may be young and sometimes impulsive, but you have a gift that few species possess, the ability to see beyond fear, to reach out even when uncertainty looms. That is a strength the galaxy often forgets." Elias felt a surge of hope at her words. All his training, all his preparation, seemed to converge in this moment of understanding. Perhaps humans were small in the galaxy, perhaps inexperienced, but there was something unique in them, something the galaxy could not ignore. By midday, the sun had risen higher, casting long shadows across the garden paths. Lyra led Elias to a pavilion at the heart of the gardens, its walls made of transparent crystal that allowed sunlight to pour in freely. Inside, soft cushions and low tables were arranged in a manner that suggested conversation and comfort rather than ceremony. They sat together, and for a while, neither spoke, simply enjoying the serene atmosphere. Then Lyra leaned slightly forward. "Elias, tell me more about your people's dreams. Not treaties or rules, but what humans hope for in the future." Elias considered this carefully. "Humans, we hope for connection. We hope to explore, to learn, to create. We make mistakes, but we try to understand one another. Even across vast distances, even when we are different, we want to find harmony." Lyra's eyes shone with a soft light. "Harmony, a concept many have tried to achieve and failed. Perhaps it has simply needed new voices to show the way." The simplicity of her words struck Elias deeply. He realized that this was not just a diplomatic visit, it was the beginning of something greater. By being themselves, curious, open, and willing to reach out, they were already planting seeds of understanding that could grow across worlds. As the day continued, other delegates began to notice the unusual bond forming between the human and the Navari princess. Whispered conversations rippled through the summit. Some were skeptical, others intrigued, but all sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. The hand-holding, the quiet moments, the shared laughter and curiosity, it was unlike any formal diplomatic act they had witnessed. It was genuine, human, and somehow revolutionary. Elias felt both pride and responsibility. He had never imagined that a simple gesture could carry such weight, yet he understood that this was only the beginning. By showing openness and kindness, he had ignited a curiosity and respect that words alone could not achieve. By evening, the gardens glowed with the light of 1,000 bioluminescent plants, creating a scene of breathtaking beauty. Lyra led Elias to a balcony overlooking the city of Lyria, where towers floated gracefully above the ground, connected by shimmering bridges of light. "Look," she said softly, "the galaxy is vast, yet it is filled with paths waiting to be discovered. Each connection, each gesture, can open doors that seemed impossible before." Elias looked out at the city, the floating towers reflecting in the shimmering pools below. For the first time, he felt that humans, small and inexperienced as they were, could truly have an impact. Not through power or force, but through understanding, kindness, and the courage to reach out across differences. Lyra turned to him, a gentle smile on her face. "You have reminded us all, Elias, that sometimes the smallest actions carry the greatest weight. The galaxy watches closely, and the moments of connection you create are already shaping what comes next." Elias took a deep breath, feeling both humility and determination. "I will do my best, Princess. I will try to honor the trust and curiosity you have shown me." Lyra nodded, her gaze steady and warm. "That is all anyone can ask, and in doing so, you have already begun to change the galaxy in ways that words cannot measure." As night fell over Lyria, the floating gardens glowed softly under the light of the stars. Elias felt a quiet joy and anticipation. The summit had only just begun, yet he sensed that the story they were writing together was larger than either of them could fully comprehend. A human and an alien princess, hand in hand, exploring the unknown together. It was a small act, yet its echo would reach far beyond the walls of the summit, touching hearts and minds across the galaxy. For Elias, the day had been more than a meeting, more than a diplomatic duty. It had been a revelation. The galaxy, in its vastness and complexity, could be changed not by power or wealth, but by simple acts of connection. And in that thought, he found hope, not just for himself or for Lyra, but for all of humanity. The stars twinkled above, and for the first time, Elias understood that even a single gesture could inspire endless possibilities. The days after the summit began to unfold with an energy Elias had never experienced. Word of his simple gesture, holding Princess Lyra's hand, had traveled beyond Lyria's floating gardens. Across the galaxy, beings from countless worlds began to watch humans differently. Reports reached Elias through official messages and private notes. Scientists, diplomats, and even artists were observing Earth with a new sense of curiosity. Some were skeptical, others intrigued, but all agreed on one thing: humans had done something no one had expected. Elias felt the weight of this attention as he walked through the gardens with Lyra. They had been exploring Lyria's ancient library that morning, a place where knowledge from millennia of the Navari's history rested. The shelves were not ordinary. They glowed faintly, the light pulsing as though alive, responding to the curiosity of those who entered. Elias marveled at the sight, his fingers brushing against the smooth, warm surfaces of the shelves. Lyra moved beside him, her presence a quiet reassurance amid the grandeur. "The Navari have always been observers," she said softly. "We watch the stars, we watch civilizations rise and fall, but rarely do we interact. Humans, you are different. You seek understanding even when it is difficult, even when it is unfamiliar. That is a quality few possess." Elias smiled. "Perhaps we are young and inexperienced, but curiosity drives us. We want to see what lies beyond ourselves, to find connection where others see only distance." Lyra's eyes gleamed with appreciation. "It is a rare gift, Elias, one that could influence the galaxy in ways we cannot yet imagine." As they wandered further, Elias realized that the Navari were not just observing him and humans in general. They were reflecting on themselves. His presence, his words, and the simple act of holding Lyra's hand had sparked discussions among the wisest of their people. They were considering not only diplomacy but also how species could interact more openly, more kindly. The ripple effects were already beginning. Later that afternoon, the summit convened for discussions among delegates. Elias was invited to speak, a responsibility both exhilarating and daunting. As he stepped onto the platform, he noticed the attention in the room. Beings from dozens of worlds were watching him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. He took a deep breath, recalling Lyra's words about the power of small gestures. "My fellow delegates," he began, his voice steady despite the pressure, "we have all traveled from distant worlds, carrying knowledge, culture, and experience. Yet we share one common goal: understanding. My people humans are young in this galaxy. We have not seen everything, nor do we claim wisdom equal to yours. But we believe that even small acts of trust and connection can create opportunities for harmony and cooperation." There was silence at first. Then murmurs began to spread across the room. Delegates exchanged glances, some nodding, others whispering in languages Elias could not understand. It was clear that his words, simple as they were, resonated. "Yesterday," Elias continued, "Princess Lyra extended her hand to me, and I accepted. A simple gesture, yet it carries meaning beyond any treaty or document. It is a reminder that the galaxy can change, not by force, but by understanding, kindness, and the willingness to connect." He paused, seeing the effect of his words. Beings leaned forward, listening intently. Some had tears in their eyes, others simply smiled. It was not admiration for humans alone, but a recognition of the possibility of change, the hope that even the youngest species could inspire something greater. After the speech, Lyra approached him with a quiet smile. "You spoke well," she said. "Your words carry the essence of your people. They see hope, and in seeing hope, they begin to act differently." Elias felt a mixture of relief and pride. "I only spoke what I felt," he admitted. "I hope it encourages others to think differently." Lyra nodded. "It has already done so. Change begins with the willingness to show one's hand, both literally and figuratively. You have taken the first step." Over the next few days, Elias noticed the subtle shifts in the summit. Delegates who had been cautious began to approach him, asking questions not just about humanity's capabilities, but about their perspectives, their art, and their philosophy. Some were fascinated by the human approach to problem-solving, noting the creativity and flexibility that often surprised even the most experienced species. Others were captivated by humans' ability to form bonds quickly, their empathy for beings different from themselves. Elias and Lyra spent long hours walking through gardens, discussing strategies for cooperation and sharing stories of their worlds. They talked about art, music, science, and dreams, and each conversation seemed to open new possibilities. Lyra's eyes sparkled when Elias described human storytelling and their fascination with heroes, myths, and exploration. "It is remarkable," she said. "Your people find meaning in journeys, in connection, in learning. Perhaps the galaxy needs more of that spirit." One afternoon, as they sat near a pond where the water glimmered with soft colors, Elias noticed a group of young Navari observing them from a distance. They were curious, hesitant, yet clearly drawn to the sight of the human, and the princess interacting with ease and warmth. Lyra noticed them as well. "Observe," she said softly. "Even the youngest among us learn from what they see. Humans have a way of teaching without intending to. Simply by being themselves, you inspire others to think differently." Elias smiled, feeling both humility and joy. "I never imagined a simple gesture could have such an impact." Lyra's expression was gentle. "The galaxy is often distracted by power, rules, and fear, but it remembers kindness and openness, and when it does, the effects are far-reaching." News of the humans' influence began to spread beyond the summit. Messages reached distant star systems, carried by trade ships, explorers, and even travelers who had glimpsed the event. Across planets, beings discussed the strange new perspective humans brought, the ability to form trust quickly, to connect across differences, and to inspire without seeking dominance. Even species that had long been cautious or suspicious began to reconsider their assumptions. Elias was invited to share insights with scholars, philosophers, and students from multiple worlds. He spoke not of conquest or power, but of curiosity, cooperation, and the importance of small acts. His audiences listened, questioned, and reflected, and slowly, a new understanding began to take root. Lyra watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. She had seen many species rise and fall, many alliances form and dissolve, yet this was different. Humans were not imposing their will. They were showing possibilities, opening minds, and reminding the galaxy that change could begin with the simplest acts of kindness. One evening, as the twin moons of Lyria rose in the sky, casting silver light over the gardens, Lyra and Elias walked along a path lined with glowing flowers. "The galaxy is listening," Lyra said softly, "and it is learning. What you have started will grow in ways neither of us can predict." Elias glanced at her, feeling the depth of her words. "I hope it grows into something good, something lasting. Humans can be stubborn and foolish, but we try." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the moons. "Try is enough. Effort, curiosity, and courage to connect are more valuable than power or wealth. You have reminded the galaxy of that truth." They paused near a fountain that reflected the stars above, and Elias felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The journey was far from over, but he understood now that humans had a place among the stars, not as conquerors or rulers, but as beings capable of inspiring hope, understanding, and unity. Days turned into weeks, and the ripple of influence continued. Delegates began sharing human ideas in their home systems. Young Navari visited Earth through holographic exchanges, fascinated by its culture, music, and art. Explorers from other species requested guidance in diplomacy, inspired by the human approach to connection. Even humans back on Earth were celebrated as symbols of a new hope, a reminder that even small species could make a difference. Elias often walked through the gardens alone, reflecting on the changes. He remembered Lyra's hand in his, the warmth and trust in that simple gesture. It had started everything: the attention, the curiosity, the subtle but profound shifts in thinking. And he realized that the most important part was not what humans were doing, but how they were doing it, with sincerity, openness, and respect. One afternoon, Lyra approached him with a soft smile. "Elias, the galaxy is beginning to change because of you, because of what humans represent. You have reminded us all that possibility exists in connection, in empathy, and in courage." Elias shook his head slightly, overwhelmed. "I didn't do this alone. You trusted me, and that made everything possible. If you hadn't, if we had," Lyra's eyes twinkled. "And yet it was your choice to respond, to act with openness and curiosity. That is what matters. Every being has the power to change the world through the choices they make. You have simply reminded us of this truth." As the sun set over Lyria, casting long shadows across the gardens, Elias felt a sense of peace. The galaxy, in its vastness and complexity, was no longer a distant, uncaring space. It was listening, learning, and beginning to understand that humans, small and inexperienced though they were, could inspire change not through force, but through kindness and connection. He looked up at the stars, remembering the words of Lyra, that even small acts could echo across the universe. He understood now that the ripple of his hand in hers would reach far beyond the summit halls, across systems and planets, inspiring beings of all kinds to think differently, to act with empathy, and to seek understanding. The galaxy, Elias realized, was beginning to fall silent once more, not in fear but in awe. It paused to watch, to reflect, and to consider a new way forward, a future shaped not by domination, but by connection. And in that silence, Elias felt the quiet promise of something extraordinary, that humans, though small and young, could remind the stars themselves of the power of trust, hope, and understanding. Months had passed since the summit on Lyria, and the galaxy was slowly, quietly transforming. Elias walked through the palace gardens with Princess Lyra, the soft hum of floating lights around them a gentle backdrop to their thoughts. The impact of their connection, the human and the alien princess holding hands, was still unfolding. Messages from distant star systems arrived daily, each carrying stories of curiosity, hope, and understanding sparked by that single act. Humans were no longer seen as outsiders or newcomers. Scholars studied their ways, artists drew inspiration from their creativity, and leaders began to consult them not for power but for perspective. Elias sometimes marveled at the ripple effects he had never imagined. He had not sought recognition, yet the galaxy had responded, not with applause but with quiet acknowledgement and respect. Lyra walked beside him, her eyes reflecting the floating lights and the golden sun above. "It is remarkable," she said softly. "The galaxy is learning from you, Elias, from humans, and it is not through force or decree but through curiosity and openness. That is a power few species ever understand." Elias smiled, humbled. "I never thought a simple gesture could do so much. I just reached out my hand." That was all, but it seems the galaxy saw more than that. Lyra's gaze softened. "Sometimes the smallest acts carry the heaviest meaning. You have reminded many that trust and connection are not weaknesses but strengths." They paused at a fountain that reflected the sky above. Water shimmered in shifting colors, mirroring the stars that would soon appear. Elias watched as a group of young Navari approached from a distance, guided by curiosity. They observed him and Lyra with wide eyes, taking in the sight of two beings from completely different worlds walking together with ease. Some whispered in awe, others giggled at shared gestures, but all were captivated. "Even the youngest learn from example," Lyra said. "Your presence has reminded them that differences are not barriers, but opportunities for understanding." Elias nodded, thinking about the countless species now opening themselves to dialogue and collaboration. Humans had inspired something beyond politics, beyond treaties. They had sparked imagination, hope, and the desire to connect. It was not immediate change, but a subtle revolution, one that began in the heart and mind before ever reaching laws or armies. As evening fell, the palace corridors glowed with the soft bioluminescence of ancient walls. Delegates from other worlds arrived for the final discussions of the summit. Elias was invited to participate, but the atmosphere was different now. Where once there had been tension and careful observation, there was now openness. Delegates smiled, shared ideas freely, and even laughed together, inspired by the human presence and the example of collaboration it had created. During the discussions, Elias noticed something extraordinary. Proposals were being shaped not only by strategy but by consideration. Species that had long been rivals sought compromise. Young delegates asked for human input on problem-solving approaches. Artists, scientists, and teachers shared stories of how humans' creativity and empathy had sparked new ideas in their own societies. It was a wave of change, subtle yet undeniable, spreading quietly across the galaxy. Lyra leaned close to Elias at one point. "Do you see?" she whispered. "Your people have reminded the galaxy that influence comes not from dominance but from understanding. You have opened doors that many thought were closed forever." Elias felt a warmth rise in his chest. "I only tried to be human," he replied. "To be curious, to listen, to care. I never imagined it could reach so far." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the shimmering lights. "That is exactly why it reached so far. Humanity does not impose, it inspires. That is a lesson the galaxy needed." After the discussions ended, Lyra led Elias back to the gardens. The air was alive with soft sounds and glowing plants. Delegates strolled past, quietly exchanging greetings and observations, some pausing to watch the human and the princess together. There was no fanfare, no ceremony, just a sense of acknowledgement that something remarkable had occurred. Elias found a quiet bench and sat, gazing at the glowing trees and the gently floating lights above. Lyra sat beside him, her hand brushing his lightly. "Do you realize," she asked, "how many species are now talking about humans in a new way? Not as invaders, not as newcomers, but as partners, teachers, and inspiration." He nodded, trying to comprehend the scale. "It is incredible. I never expected such a response from a single gesture, a conversation, or even small acts, but I see now that connection matters more than we imagine." Lyra leaned back, her gaze on the glowing plants. "And yet, the galaxy has only begun to understand. The ripples will continue, Elias. Seeds of curiosity, empathy, and cooperation have been planted. One day, they will bloom in ways we cannot predict." Elias thought about the young Navari who had watched them, about the distant systems now exchanging ideas with Earth, and about the countless beings whose perspectives had shifted. He realized that humans had a role to play far beyond what anyone could have imagined, not as conquerors nor rulers, but as catalysts for understanding. The following morning, the summit began its final sessions. Elias spoke again, this time about hope, curiosity, and collaboration. He emphasized listening, empathy, and the importance of approaching challenges with an open heart. Delegates took notes, asked questions, and debated ideas in ways that reflected a subtle transformation. There was no conflict, no tension, only the desire to learn and grow together. During a pause, Lyra took Elias aside. "You have done more than diplomacy," she said. "You have reminded the galaxy that kindness, openness, and courage are not signs of weakness. They are signs of strength." Elias smiled, feeling both humility and pride. "I only tried to be human to show what we believe in, that it could ripple so far. It is beyond anything I expected." Lyra placed her hand over his lightly, a gesture that had begun it all. "And yet it began with you, Elias, with that small moment. Sometimes the simplest actions echo the loudest." The final day of the summit concluded with quiet celebrations, rather than formal declarations. Delegates mingled freely, exchanging ideas and sharing insights. Elias noticed small changes everywhere. Species that had been distant now interacted openly, teachers discussed joint programs, and artists shared their interpretations of the human influence. Even governments and leaders began to adopt approaches inspired by humans, valuing dialogue over domination, understanding over fear. That evening, Elias and Lyra walked to a quiet hill overlooking the city of Lyria. Towers floated above the ground, their reflections shimmering in the waters below. Stars appeared in the sky, countless points of light stretching into infinity. "Do you see that?" Lyra asked. "Every light is a world. Every world has a choice. And your presence, your humanity, has reminded them that choices can be guided by empathy, curiosity, and understanding." Elias gazed at the stars, feeling a sense of awe and responsibility. "I never imagined a single human could inspire so much," he said. "But perhaps the future does not rely on one person, but on the willingness of many to act with kindness and connection." Lyra nodded. "Exactly. You have shown that change begins not with power but with choice, and every choice can ripple across the stars." They stood in silence, hand in hand, watching as the city lights mingled with the stars above. Elias felt a deep peace, knowing that humans had found their place in the galaxy, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as beings capable of inspiring hope, understanding, and unity. The galaxy had begun to fall silent once more, not in fear but in wonder. It paused, reflecting on what it had seen, and considering a future shaped by connection rather than conflict. And in that silence, Elias understood something profound. Humans, though young and small in the cosmic scale, could teach the universe about trust, courage, and the power of a simple gesture. As the moons rose over Lyria, casting silver light across the gardens, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. The ripples of human influence would continue to spread, reaching distant worlds, touching minds and hearts in ways that no one could fully predict. He squeezed Lyra's hand gently, feeling the warmth and reassurance that had started it all. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me, for showing me that even small acts can change the galaxy." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "No, Elias, thank you. You reminded us all that the galaxy is not only shaped by power or fear, but by courage, kindness, and connection. And that is a lesson that will echo far beyond this summit, far beyond our time." Elias looked out at the stars once more, imagining the countless worlds now considering a new way of thinking, a new way of interacting. He understood that humans had begun something extraordinary, not with armies or weapons, but with openness, curiosity, and the willingness to reach out across differences. The galaxy had fallen silent indeed, but it was a silence filled with hope, reflection, and anticipation. It was a silence that promised a brighter future, one shaped not by dominance but by understanding. And as Elias and Lyra stood hand in hand, the stars above seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement, as if the universe itself had paused to witness a moment that would be remembered for generations. The summit had ended, but a new story had begun. A story of connection, empathy, and the quiet power of humans to inspire change across the galaxy. And in that story, Elias knew there was no end, only a future filled with possibility, wonder, and hope. When the alien princess took the human's hand, the galaxy fell silent,